The dust settled on Main Street just as Bethany Zimmerman spotted the couple stepping down from the stagecoach, and her heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. 3 years had passed since Thomas Whitmore had broken their engagement 2 weeks before their wedding, claiming he needed to find himself out in California. And now here he stood in Oregon City with a delicate blonde woman on his arm, her silk dress shimmering in the harsh August sunlight of 1876. Bethany's fingers tightened around the basket of supplies she had just purchased from the general store, her knuckles turning white as she watched Thomas help his wife navigate the wooden steps, his hand protective and tender in a way he had never been with her. She should have turned around immediately, should have ducked back into the store or slipped down the alley between the buildings, but her boots felt nailed to the boardwalk. The September heat pressed down on her shoulders like a physical weight, making her calico dress stick to her spine. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life after Thomas left, taking over her father's seamstress shop when he passed away last winter, earning respect in this frontier town through sheer determination and skill with a needle. Now all of that felt like it might crumble because she could not seem to make her legs move. Thomas had not seen her yet. He was laughing at something his wife said, his head thrown back in genuine joy, and Bethany felt the old wound tear open fresh and raw. She had loved him once, or thought she had, but more than anything she felt the crushing humiliation of being left behind, of being the woman who was not good enough, not interesting enough, not worthy enough to keep. You planning to stand there all day? Or are you going to move before that basket cuts off the blood to your hands? The voice came from directly behind her, low and warm with a hint of amusement, and Bethany jumped so hard she nearly dropped her supplies. She spun around to find herself looking up at a tall man in worn denim and a brown leather vest, his dark hair slightly too long beneath a dusty hat, and his eyes the color of Tennessee whiskey in the sunlight. She had seen him around town a few times over the past month, always keeping to himself, but she had never spoken to him directly. "I am sorry, I was just," she started, but the words died in her throat as Thomas's voice called out across the street. Bethany Zimmerman, is that really you?" The cowboy's eyes flickered from her face to the couple now crossing the dusty street toward them, and something sharp and understanding passed through his expression. Before Bethany could think of what to do or say, the stranger shifted closer to her, his presence suddenly solid and protective at her back. "Friend of yours?" he asked quietly, though she suspected he already knew the answer. "Not exactly," she managed to whisper back, her throat tight with a dozen conflicting emotions. Thomas reached them with his wife still clinging to his arm, and up close Bethany could see that he looked prosperous, his suit well-tailored and expensive, his boots polished to a high shine. His wife was even prettier than she had appeared from a distance, with cornflower blue eyes and perfect pink lips curved into a curious smile. "Bethany, I cannot believe it. What are the chances?" Thomas exclaimed, seeming genuinely pleased to see her. "You look well. Town life must be agreeing with you." "I am doing fine," Bethany said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I run my father's shop now." "Oh, that is right, I heard about your father. My condolences." Thomas's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy, though it felt performative. "This is my wife, Alina. We have been married just over 2 years now. We met in San Francisco, and what a city that is. Nothing like this frontier town, I must say." Alina extended her gloved hand with practiced grace. "It is lovely to meet you, Miss Zimmerman. Any friend of Thomas's is a friend of mine." The words were kind, but they felt like salt in an open wound. Bethany took the offered hand briefly, her own fingers rough from work compared to Alina's softness. She could feel the cowboy still standing close behind her, a silent presence that somehow made her feel less exposed. "What brings you back to Oregon City?" Bethany asked, though what she really wanted to know was why Thomas thought she would want to see him at all. "Business, actually," Thomas said, puffing up slightly with importance. "I've done quite well for myself in shipping and trade, and I am looking to expand my operations to the Oregon Territory. We will be in town for several weeks while I meet with various contacts and explore opportunities." Several weeks. The words hit Bethany like a physical blow. She had thought this would be a brief, terrible encounter that she could survive and then move past. But the idea of seeing Thomas and his perfect wife around town for weeks, of having to smile and pretend she was unaffected, felt impossible. "That sounds very successful," she said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "I hope you find what you are looking for." "We should have dinner together while we are here," Thomas suggested, oblivious to the way Bethany had gone pale. "Catch up properly." "I would love to hear what you have been up to these past few years, and I am sure Alina would enjoy getting to know the town through someone who actually lives here." "I think Miss Zimmerman might already have her evening spoken for," the cowboy said, his voice cutting through Thomas's enthusiasm with quiet authority. "Seeing as how we have plans most nights." Bethany's head whipped around to stare at him, but his expression remained calm and pleasant, though his eyes held a challenge as he looked at Thomas. The stranger shifted slightly, and his hand came to rest lightly on the small of her back, the touch respectful but unmistakably possessive. Thomas's eyebrows rose, his gaze moving between Bethany and the cowboy with obvious surprise. "Oh, I did not realize. You are courting someone. This is Quinn Dalton," Bethany said quickly, her mind racing to catch up with what was happening. "He is. We are getting to know each other," Quinn finished smoothly, his hand still steady against her back. "And I am afraid I keep her pretty busy, but I am sure you folks will run into her around town during your stay. Oregon City is not that big after all." Alina was watching the exchange with intelligent eyes, and Bethany wondered if the other woman could see through the lie, could tell that she and Quinn had never exchanged more than a polite nod before this very moment. But Alina's smile never wavered, and she squeezed Thomas's arm gently. "Of course, we completely understand," Alina said warmly. "It was lovely to meet you both. I am sure we will see you around." Thomas looked like he wanted to say more, his expression confused, and perhaps a bit put out that Bethany was not available to serve as his guide to the town he had once abandoned. But Alina was already steering him away, murmuring something about finding their hotel, and within moments they were gone, disappearing down the boardwalk. Bethany stood frozen for several long seconds after they left, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Then Quinn's hand dropped away from her back, and the sudden absence of his touch broke whatever spell had held her in place. She turned to face him fully, not sure whether to thank him or demand to know what he thought he was doing. "I apologize if I overstepped," Quinn said before she could speak, pushing his hat back slightly so she could see his face better. "But you looked like you were about to shatter into 1,000 pieces, and I figured you did not really want to have dinner with those folks." "You figured correctly," Bethany admitted, letting out a shaky breath. He was. Your former fiancé, I am guessing, given the way you reacted when you saw him. It was not really a question, but Bethany nodded anyway. "He left me 3 years ago. Broke our engagement right before the wedding. I did not know he had gotten married. I certainly did not know he would come back here." Quinn's expression darkened slightly, anger flashing through his eyes. "That takes a special kind of fool. Leaving you and then showing up expecting you to be happy to see him." The casual compliment, delivered without any apparent expectation, made warmth spread through Bethany's chest. "Thank you for stepping in. I am not sure I could have handled dinner with them." "You do not owe him anything, including your time or attention," Quinn said firmly. Then his expression turned slightly rueful. "Though I might have made things complicated by suggesting we are courting, if that causes you trouble, I am sorry." "No, actually, it might make the next few weeks bearable," Bethany said slowly, the idea taking shape even as she spoke. "If they think I am seeing someone, Thomas might leave me alone instead of trying to rekindle some kind of friendship I do not want." Quinn studied her for a moment, his intelligent eyes seeming to read more than she said aloud. "Are you suggesting we should pretend to court, keep up the act while they are in town? Would you be willing to do that?" Bethany asked, hearing the hope in her own voice and not caring. "I know it is a strange request, and we barely know each other, but I cannot face them alone. I cannot spend weeks being pitied or compared to his perfect wife." "You would not be the one coming up short in any comparison," Quinn said quietly, and the sincerity in his voice made Bethany's breath catch. "And yes, I would be willing to help you. Seems like the decent thing to do." Relief flooded through Bethany so intensely that her eyes actually stung with tears. "Thank you, truly. I will make it worth your while, I promise. I could cook you meals or mend your clothes, or how about we just agree to help each other out?" Quinn interrupted gently. "No payment needed. Sometimes people just need someone in their corner." They stood there on the boardwalk, the afternoon sun beating down and the sounds of town life continuing around them, and Bethany felt something shift in her chest. This stranger had stepped in to protect her when he had no reason to, had offered her a lifeline without asking for anything in return, and she found herself wanting to know everything about him. "I should probably know more about you if we are going to convince people we are courting," she said, trying to inject some practicality into the situation. "Where are you from? What do you do?" Quinn's lips quirked into something that was almost a smile. "I am a horse wrangler mostly. I have been traveling around the territory breaking horses for ranchers and helping with cattle drives. Got into town about a month back and have been doing odd jobs while I figure out my next move." "Why Oregon City?" Bethany asked, genuinely curious now. "Heard the land was good here, the climate better than some other places I have been," Quinn said with a slight shrug. "Been thinking about settling down somewhere, maybe starting my own ranch if I can scrape together enough money. I am 25, figure it is time to put down roots instead of drifting." Bethany felt herself relax slightly. He was closer to her own age of 23, not some grizzled older cowboy or reckless young troublemaker. There was something steady about him, something solid and trustworthy in his bearing. "I live above the seamstress shop on 3rd Street, she told him. "I took over my father's business after he passed. It is not much, but it keeps me fed and housed. Running your own business at 23. Quinn said, and his tone held respect. "That is impressive." No one had ever called her impressive before. Practical, yes. Hardworking, certainly. But impressive was new, and Bethany found she liked the way it sounded. "We should probably be seen together around town if we want people to believe this," she said, her practical nature reasserting itself. "Maybe you could walk me home. My shop is not far." "I would be happy to," Quinn said, and this time his smile was full and genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to something that made Bethany's pulse quicken. He offered her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked down Main Street together, and Bethany was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople who saw them. Quinn Dalton had been keeping to himself since arriving in Oregon City, not unfriendly but not particularly social either, and seeing him with the town's most eligible seamstress would certainly generate gossip. But for once, Bethany did not mind being the subject of speculation. Let people talk. Let Thomas hear that she had moved on, that she had found someone who actually wanted to be seen with her. "Tell me something real about yourself," Quinn said as they turned onto 3rd Street. "Something beyond the facts." The request surprised her, and Bethany had to think about it. "I hate sewing," she admitted finally. "I am good at it and I need the income, but I do not love it the way my father did. What I really enjoy is reading. I have a whole shelf of books in my rooms, and sometimes I stay up too late just because I cannot put a story down." "What kind of books?" Quinn asked, sounding genuinely interested. "Adventure stories, mostly. Novels about people exploring new places, having exciting experiences. It is silly, I suppose, reading about adventures while living such a quiet life." "It is not silly," Quinn said firmly. "Everyone needs an escape sometimes. And who knows? Maybe your life will not always be quiet." They reached the seamstress shop, a neat building with clean windows displaying some of Bethany's work. She reluctantly let go of Quinn's arm, not quite ready for him to leave but unsure how to ask him to stay. "Thank you again for today," she said. "You saved me from a truly awful situation. Like I said, seems like the decent thing to do." Quinn tipped his hat to her, the gesture somehow both respectful and intimate. "I will come by tomorrow if that works for you. Maybe we could take a walk, let people see us together." "I would like that," Bethany said, meaning it more than she expected to. She watched him walk away down the street, his long stride easy and confident, and wondered what she had gotten herself into. This was supposed to be a simple arrangement, a way to protect herself from Thomas's unwanted attention and the pity of the townspeople who remembered her humiliation. But something about Quinn Dalton made her feel things she had not felt in years, made her want things she had convinced herself she no longer needed. The next morning dawned clear and warm, another in a long string of beautiful late summer days. Bethany opened her shop at 8 o'clock as usual, but she found herself distracted, watching the street through her window more than she worked on the dress she was supposed to be hemming. Would Quinn really come by, or had he changed his mind overnight? Maybe the whole thing had been a moment of chivalry that he regretted now. But at 10 o'clock, just as she was starting to resign herself to disappointment, the shop door opened and Quinn walked in. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his shirt fresh and his hair still damp like he had dunked his head in a water barrel. He held his hat in his hands and looked slightly uncomfortable among the fabrics and dress forms, so clearly out of his element that Bethany had to fight back a smile. "Morning," he said. "I hope I am not interrupting your work." "Not at all," Bethany assured him, setting aside the dress and wiping her hands on her apron. "I was hoping you would come by." "Told you I would," Quinn said simply, as if keeping his word was the most natural thing in the world. They walked through town together, taking the long route past the church and the schoolhouse, past the saloon and the bank. Bethany kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling Quinn about the people they passed. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house and always had opinions about everyone's business. Mr. Chen, who owned the laundry and made the best dumplings Bethany had ever tasted. Deputy Marshal, who was courting the preacher's daughter despite her father's objections. Quinn listened more than he talked, but when he did speak, his observations were sharp and often made Bethany laugh. He noticed things she had stopped seeing, the way the baker always had flour in his left eyebrow but never his right. How the banker's wife wore increasingly elaborate hats as if trying to compete with the church steeple. They were passing the hotel when Thomas and Alina emerged and Bethany felt her spine stiffen automatically. But Quinn's hand found hers, his fingers warm and calloused as they laced through her own, and the simple touch gave her strength. "Miss Zimmerman," Mr. Dalton. Alina called out with apparent delight. What a lovely morning for a walk. It certainly is, Quinn agreed pleasantly, keeping Bethany's hand firmly in his own. You folks settling in all right? Oh yes, the hotel is perfectly adequate, Thomas said, though his tone suggested it fell far short of what he was used to. His eyes dropped to where Quinn and Bethany's hands were joined, and something flickered across his face. Though I must say, I am still adjusting to being back in a frontier town after the sophistication of San Francisco. Oregon City has its own charms, Bethany said, lifting her chin slightly. Not everyone needs big city sophistication to be happy. Of course not, Thomas agreed quickly, though his smile was patronizing. I only meant that it must be quite different for you, never having left. You always did have simple tastes. The words were calculated to sting, to remind her that she was provincial and unsophisticated compared to his worldly new wife. But before the hurt could really sink in, Quinn's thumb stroked gently across her knuckles, a silent reminder that she was not alone. I have always thought the best things in life tend to be simple, Quinn said, his voice easy but his eyes hard as he looked at Thomas. Good land, honest work, people who keep their word, that kind of thing. Fancy cities are fine for visiting, but I would not want to live somewhere that made me forget what really matters. The implied criticism was subtle but clear, and Thomas's face flushed slightly. Alina, however, seemed amused, her intelligent eyes studying Quinn with new interest. What a refreshing perspective, she said warmly. Thomas, we should let these two continue their walk. We have that appointment with Mr. Fredericks about warehouse space. Thomas allowed himself to be led away, but not before throwing one last confused look at Bethany, as if he could not quite figure out how his former fiancé had ended up with someone like Quinn Dalton. Once they were out of earshot, Bethany let out a long breath. He always did know exactly what to say to make me feel small. Then he is either cruel or stupid, Quinn said bluntly. Probably both. There is nothing small about you, Bethany. You run your own business, you take care of yourself, you built a life after he tried to destroy it. That takes strength most people do not have. Bethany found herself blinking back tears for the second time in as many days, but these were different from the devastated tears she had shed when Thomas first left. These felt almost like relief, like someone had finally said the words she had needed to hear for 3 long years. Thank you, she whispered. You barely know me, but you seem to understand better than people I have known my whole life. Sometimes distance gives clarity, Quinn said quietly. And sometimes you just recognize something in another person because you have been through similar things yourself. You have had your heart broken, Bethany asked, genuinely curious now. Quinn was quiet for a moment, his expression turning inward. Not by a woman, he said finally. But I have known what it is like to be left behind, to feel like you were not good enough. My father made sure I understood that loud and clear before I left home at 16. The casual way he said it did not hide the old pain underneath, and Bethany squeezed his hand without thinking. I am sorry. No one should make their child feel that way. Water under the bridge now, Quinn said, though his return squeeze suggested her sympathy meant something. Point is, I understand what you are feeling. And I am happy to help make sure that fool and his wife do not make you feel that way again. They continued their walk, their joined hands feeling more natural with each step. By the time Quinn walked her back to her shop, Bethany realized she had genuinely enjoyed herself, had forgotten for long stretches that this was supposed to be an act. The pattern repeated over the next week. Quinn would come by the shop each morning, and they would walk together, sometimes running errands, sometimes just talking. They encountered Thomas and Alina twice more, and each time Quinn's presence made the meetings bearable, his quiet support giving Bethany the confidence to hold her head high. But something else was happening too, something neither of them had planned for. The conversations grew deeper, more personal. Quinn told her about growing up on a failing ranch in Texas, about a father who drank too much and blamed his sons for his own failures, about leaving home with nothing but a horse and the clothes on his back. Bethany shared her own stories, about a mother who died when she was 10, about taking care of her grieving father, about the loneliness of watching all her friends marry and start families while she poured herself into work. Quinn started staying for lunch, then for dinner. Bethany discovered he was handy with repairs, and soon he was fixing the loose board on her stairs, the squeaky hinge on her door, the window that never quite closed right. He never asked for payment, but she fed him meals that grew increasingly elaborate, realizing she enjoyed cooking for someone who appreciated it. The people of Oregon City began treating them as an established couple, and neither Bethany nor Quinn corrected the assumption. Mrs. Henderson smiled knowingly whenever she saw them together. Mr. Chen started giving Bethany extra dumplings, enough for 2 people. Even Deputy Marshal, who had initially been suspicious of the quiet stranger in town, started nodding respectfully when Quinn passed. It was nearly 2 weeks after their arrangement began when everything changed. Bethany was closing up the shop one evening when she heard raised voices outside. She stepped out onto the boardwalk to find Quinn facing off with 2 men she recognized as employees at the lumber mill, both of them clearly drunk and looking for trouble. "Think you are pretty special, do not you?" one of them slurred, swaying slightly. "Coming into town, stealing the prettiest girl around. What makes you so much better than the rest of us?" "I am not looking for trouble," Quinn said calmly, his hands loose at his sides but his body tense and ready. "Why do not you boys go sleep it off?" "Maybe we do not want to," the second man growled. "Maybe we want to teach you some manners about moving in on our town." Bethany's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to step forward. "Leave him alone, Ben. You have both had too much to drink." "Stay out of this, Bethany," Ben said, barely glancing at her. "This is between men." "There is nothing between anyone," Quinn said firmly. "Go home, sleep. Tomorrow this will seem foolish." But Ben was already swinging, his fist aimed at Quinn's face with drunken clumsiness. Quinn stepped aside easily, not even bothering to hit back, just letting Ben's own momentum carry him stumbling forward. The second man tried to grab Quinn from behind, but Quinn twisted away, still refusing to throw a punch. "I said I am not looking for trouble," Quinn repeated, his voice harder now. "Do not make me defend myself." Deputy Marshal came running up the street then, attracted by the commotion, and within minutes he had the 2 drunken men in hand, apologizing to Quinn and promising they would spend the night in jail to cool off. Once they were gone, Bethany turned to Quinn with wide eyes. "You could have hit them. You could have ended that in seconds. Why did you not fight back?" "Because fighting should be the last resort, not the first," Quinn said simply. "And because I did not want you to see me that way, did not want you to think I was violent." The admission was raw and honest, and it hit Bethany right in the chest. He cared what she thought of him. This was not just an act anymore, not just a favor for a woman in trouble. Somewhere along the way, it had become real. "Quinn," she started, not sure what she wanted to say but needing to say something. "I should go," he interrupted, his voice rough. "Make sure those idiots did not stir up any more trouble." He left before she could respond, and Bethany stood alone on the boardwalk, her heart racing and her mind spinning. Everything had changed, and she was not sure when or how, but she knew with absolute certainty that her feelings for Quinn Dalton were no longer pretend. She did not see him the next day. He did not come by the shop in the morning, and when she walked past the boarding house where he was staying, Mrs. Henderson said he had gone out before dawn and had not returned. Bethany tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting, replaying every conversation, every touch, every moment they had shared. It was late afternoon when her shop door finally opened, but instead of Quinn, Thomas Whitmore walked in. Bethany straightened from the dress she was hemming, surprise and wariness flooding through her. "Thomas, where is Alina?" "Resting at the hotel. She has not been feeling well." Thomas removed his hat, turning it in his hands in a nervous gesture she remembered from when they were courting. "I wanted to talk to you alone, Bethany. I think we need to clear the air." "I do not think we have anything to discuss," Bethany said carefully, setting down her needle. "I think we do." Thomas moved further into the shop, his expression earnest. "I have been watching you these past 2 weeks with that cowboy, and I have been thinking about the past, about us, about the mistake I made." Bethany's stomach dropped. "Thomas, do not. I should never have left you," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "I was young and stupid and thought I needed adventure, needed to see the world. But what I found was that success means nothing if you do not have the right person beside you." "You have Alina beside you," Bethany pointed out, her voice cold. "Your wife." "Alina is lovely, but she is not you," Thomas said, stepping closer. "She does not understand me the way you did, does not know my history, my roots. These past weeks, seeing you again, remembering what we had, I cannot stop thinking that I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left." "Stop talking," Bethany said sharply, anger rising hot and fierce in her chest. "You do not get to do this. You do not get to waltz back into my life with your beautiful wife and your successful business and tell me you made a mistake. You are 3 years too late." "I know I hurt you," Thomas began. "You shattered me," Bethany interrupted, her voice shaking now. "You broke our engagement 2 weeks before our wedding, humiliated me in front of the entire town, and left me to pick up the pieces alone. I spent months unable to leave my house without seeing pity in everyone's eyes. I had to rebuild my entire life from nothing. And you think you can just apologize and I will what? Fall back into your arms." "I thought maybe we could start over," Thomas said weakly, apparently surprised by her vehemence. "If you still have feelings, I have feelings for someone else," Bethany said firmly, and as she said it, she realized it was completely true. "Quinn is twice the man you ever were. He is honest and kind, and he shows up when he says he will. He does not make promises he cannot keep, and he does not leave people behind. So no, Thomas, we cannot start over. We are done, and we have been done for 3 years." Thomas's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "That drifter. You are choosing him over me. Bethany, I am offering you a real life, not some fantasy with a horse wrangler who will probably be gone in another month." "Get out of my shop," Bethany said, her voice deadly calm now. "Get out and do not come back. Whatever you are doing here in Oregon City, finish it quickly and leave. I do not want to see you again." "You are making a mistake," Thomas said, backing toward the door. "You will regret this." "The only thing I regret is ever agreeing to marry you in the first place," Bethany shot back. "Now get out." Thomas left, slamming the door behind him, and Bethany sank into her chair, shaking with the force of everything she had just said. But beneath the anger and the shock, she felt lighter than she had in years. She had finally said everything she needed to say, had finally stood up for herself instead of quietly accepting whatever came her way. And she had realized with perfect clarity that she was in love with Quinn Dalton. The shop door opened again, and Bethany's head snapped up, ready to tell Thomas off more thoroughly if he had dared to come back. But it was Quinn who stood in the doorway, his expression dark and stormy. "I was across the street," he said without preamble. I saw Whitmore come in here. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? Not physically, Bethany said, her heart lifting at the sight of him. He wanted to tell me he made a mistake leaving me, that he should have married me instead of Alina. Quinn's jaw tightened dangerously. What did you say? I told him he was 3 years too late and to get out of my shop, Bethany said, standing up and moving toward Quinn. I told him I have feelings for someone else. Something flashed in Quinn's eyes, hope and fear and wanting all mixed together. Do you have feelings for someone else? Yes, Bethany said simply, stopping right in front of him. I have feelings for you, Quinn. Real feelings, not pretend ones. And I think I have for a while now, but I was too scared to admit it. Quinn stared at her for a long moment, and Bethany's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. Then he reached out, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I came back to tell you I cannot do this anymore, he said roughly. That I was leaving town because pretending to court you when I wanted it to be real was killing me. But Bethany, if you are saying what I think you are saying, I am saying I do not want this to be pretend anymore, Bethany whispered, leaning into his touch. I am saying I want this to be real. I am saying I am falling in love with you. Quinn made a sound low in his throat, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and firm against hers, his hand still cradling her face like she was something precious. Bethany's hands came up to grip his vest, pulling him closer, pouring 3 years of loneliness and longing into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said fiercely. I have loved you since the first week, when you told me about your books and got that dreamy look in your eyes. I kept telling myself it was just an arrangement, that I was helping you out, but I was lying to myself. So we are both fools, Bethany said, laughing a little through the tears that were spilling down her cheeks now. Falling in love while pretending to fall in love. The best kind of fools, Quinn agreed, kissing her again, softer this time but no less meaningful. They stood there in her shop, holding each other as the evening light faded to dusk outside, and Bethany felt something settle deep in her chest. This was what she had been missing with Thomas, this feeling of rightness, of two people who fit together in all the ways that mattered. So what happens now? She asked eventually, reluctantly pulling back enough to see his face. Now I stop staying at the boarding house and start looking for land, Quinn said firmly. I want to build that ranch I have been dreaming about, put down real roots here in Oregon City. And I want you beside me if you will have me. That sounds like a proposal, Mr. Dalton, Bethany said, her lips curving into a smile. Not yet, Quinn said seriously. When I propose, it will be proper, with a ring and everything you deserve. But I am saying that is where I am headed, where I hope we are headed. I want to marry you, Bethany. I want to build a life with you. I want that too, Bethany said, fresh tears spilling over. I want all of that with you. The next morning, all of Oregon City knew that Quinn Dalton and Bethany Zimmerman were officially courting for real. Not that most people had realized there was any question about it. Mrs. Henderson was delighted, claiming she had known from the start they were perfect for each other. Mr. Chen gave them so many dumplings they had to share them with half the town. Thomas and Alina left Oregon City 3 days later. Thomas's business apparently concluded much faster than anticipated. Bethany watched their stagecoach depart from the window of her shop, Quinn's arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and felt absolutely nothing. That chapter of her life was closed, and she was ready for the new one beginning. Quinn was true to his word about finding land. He had saved more money from his wandering years than Bethany had realized. And within a month, he had purchased 200 acres just outside town. Good grazing land with a creek running through it, and a small grove of trees that would be perfect for building. "It is not much yet," he told her as they stood looking out over the property on a crisp October afternoon. "But I can see what it will become. A house there, by the trees. Barn and stables closer to the road. Pastures for horses and cattle. It will take years to build it all, but I want to do it right." "It sounds perfect," Bethany said, imagining it all with him. "Can I help? I am not much use with construction, but I could. You could live there with me," Quinn interrupted, turning to face her. "As my wife." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It is not fancy," he said, suddenly nervous. "But Bethany Zimmerman, you are the strongest, bravest, most amazing woman I have ever met. You make me want to be better, to build something lasting, to put down roots and never leave. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Bethany said, not even needing to think about it. "Yes, absolutely yes." Quinn slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it was meant to be there. Then he was kissing her again, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around while she laughed with pure joy. They were married in early December, in the small church with half of Oregon City in attendance. Bethany wore a dress she had made herself, simple but beautiful, and Quinn wore his best suit with his hair neatly trimmed. Deputy Marshal served as best man, and Mrs. Henderson cried through the entire ceremony. The winter months were spent in Bethany's rooms above the shop while Quinn worked on building their house. He hired help from town, and Bethany closed the shop 3 days a week to assist with whatever she could manage. She learned to hammer nails straight, to measure wood, to think about structure and support. Quinn was patient with her efforts, teaching her with the same gentle care he showed his horses. By spring, the house was finished, a beautiful 2-story structure with windows that caught the morning light and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. They moved in on the first warm day of May, carrying furniture and belongings out to their new home together. Bethany continued running her seamstress shop, riding into town 3 days a week while Quinn worked the ranch. He bought his first horses that summer, beautiful animals he broke with patience and skill, and his reputation as a horse trainer spread quickly. Within a year, ranchers were coming from all over Oregon Territory to buy Quinn Dalton's horses. Their life fell into a comfortable rhythm, hard work balanced with quiet evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and fears and ordinary observations. Quinn taught Bethany to ride, and she taught him to dance, practicing in their kitchen while she hummed the tunes. It was in the fall of 1878, nearly 2 years after that fateful day on Main Street, when Bethany realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before telling Quinn. When she finally did, sitting on their porch as the evening light painted everything gold, he went so still she thought he had not heard her. "Quinn," she said uncertainly. "Did you—" He turned to her with tears in his eyes, pulling her into his arms so gently she might have been made of glass. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Bethany asked, though she could feel the answer in the way he held her. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Quinn said roughly. "Bethany, you have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning grateful, and now a child. I do not have words for what I am feeling." Their son was born in May of 1879, arriving on a warm spring morning after a long night of labor. Quinn paced the downstairs while Mrs. Henderson and the midwife attended Bethany, wearing a path in their new floorboards. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the bedroom with wild eyes. "A boy," Mrs. Henderson announced proudly, placing the tiny bundle in Bethany's arms. Healthy and strong, with his father's lungs judging by that yell. Quinn sank onto the bed beside Bethany, staring at their son with wonder. The baby had dark hair like Quinn and Bethany's green eyes, and he was absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Bethany asked softly, stroking the baby's soft cheek. James, Quinn said after a moment, after your father. He would have loved this, loved seeing you so happy. Bethany's eyes filled with tears. James Dalton, it is perfect. James was a happy baby who grew into an adventurous toddler, keeping both his parents constantly busy. Quinn proved to be a natural father, patient and playful, teaching his son about horses and cattle with endless enthusiasm. Bethany watched them together and felt her heart expand with love she had not known was possible. 2 years later, their daughter was born, arriving in the middle of a summer thunderstorm. They named her Rose, and she had Quinn's honey-colored eyes and Bethany's stubborn determination. Where James was cautious and thoughtful, Rose was fearless and impulsive, climbing anything she could reach and getting into constant mischief. The ranch prospered beyond their initial dreams. Quinn's reputation brought steady business, and they were able to buy more land, expand the house, hire hands to help with the work. Bethany eventually sold her seamstress shop to a young woman newly arrived from back east, keeping only her favorite clients and working from home so she could spend more time with the children. Oregon City grew too, transforming from a frontier town to an established community. New families moved in, businesses expanded, and the rough edges slowly smoothed. Through it all, Quinn and Bethany remained fixtures in the community, known for their fairness, their hospitality, and their obvious devotion to each other. Sometimes, Bethany would think back to that day when she had stood frozen on the boardwalk, watching Thomas arrive with his new wife, feeling like her world was ending. She never saw Thomas again after he left, but she heard through gossip that his marriage had ended badly, that his business had failed, that he had drifted from city to city looking for success that always eluded him. She did not take satisfaction in his troubles, but she did feel grateful for the path her life had taken. If Thomas had not broken her heart, if he had not shown up that day in Oregon City, she might never have found Quinn. She might never have known what real love felt like, what it meant to build a life with someone who was truly your partner in every way. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised her with a trip. He arranged for Mrs. Henderson to watch the children for a few days, and he took Bethany up into the mountains, to a beautiful lake surrounded by wildflowers. They camped there for 3 days, talking and laughing and making love under the stars like they were young sweethearts again instead of parents of 2 energetic children. You ever regret it? Quinn asked one night as they lay together by the campfire, Bethany tucked against his side. Settling for a horse rancher instead of finding someone more prosperous. Settling. Bethany lifted her head to look at him in disbelief. Quinn Dalton, you are the least settling thing that ever happened to me. You are everything I never dared to dream of. Good, Quinn said, pulling her closer, because you are stuck with me, forever. Forever sounds perfect, Bethany agreed, kissing him softly. They returned home to their children's excited shrieks, James and Rose practically tackling them with stories of everything that had happened while they were gone. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Quinn and Bethany stood on their porch looking out over their land, their hands joined between them. Remember when this was all just dirt and dreams, Quinn said quietly. I remember being terrified and heartbroken, and then you stepped in to save me, Bethany replied, squeezing his hand. I did not save you, Quinn corrected gently. You saved yourself. I just made sure you did not have to do it alone. We saved each other, Bethany decided, and built something beautiful together. The years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by small joys and occasional sorrows, by children growing and the ranch expanding, by the deepening of love that comes from choosing each other every single day. James grew into a thoughtful young man who loved the horses as much as his father did, while Rose became a skilled rider who could outshoot most of the ranch hands by the time she was 12. In 1890, when Bethany was 37 and Quinn 39, they were blessed with a third child, another son they named Daniel. He was unexpected but welcomed with joy by the whole family, and James and Rose doted on their baby brother with fierce protectiveness. Quinn's hair started going gray at the temples, and laugh lines appeared around Bethany's eyes, but they still looked at each other like newlyweds. They still danced in the kitchen, still talked for hours on the porch, still reached for each other in the night like magnets finding true north. The ranch became known throughout Oregon Territory as one of the finest horse operations, and wealthy buyers came from as far as California to purchase Quinn Dalton's carefully trained animals. But no amount of success changed who Quinn was at his core: steady, honest, devoted to his family above all else. Bethany published her first book in 1895, a collection of stories about frontier life that surprised everyone, including herself. She had started writing in the evenings after the children were in bed, just little observations and memories, but Quinn had encouraged her to shape them into something more. A publisher in Portland took a chance on the manuscript, and suddenly, Bethany Dalton was not just a rancher's wife but an author in her own right. "Look at you," Quinn said proudly when the first printed copy arrived, holding her close as she cried happy tears. "You always wanted adventures, and now you are sharing them with the world." "You are my greatest adventure," Bethany told him, meaning it with every fiber of her being. By the turn of the century, James had taken over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, a responsible 21-year-old who had inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's business sense. Rose had shocked everyone by announcing her intention to become a doctor, heading off to medical school back east with her parents' blessing and support. Daniel, at 10 years old, was still deciding who he wanted to be, trying on different dreams like clothes until he found one that fit. Quinn and Bethany were in their mid-40s now, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and hard-won happiness. They had weathered droughts and harsh winters, sick children and difficult foaling seasons, the normal challenges of building a life in a still, wild land. But they had weathered it all together, and that made all the difference. One evening in the summer of 1901, 25 years after that fateful day on Main Street, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Their grandchildren played in the yard. James had married a sweet woman named Catherine 2 years earlier, and they had a toddler son and a baby daughter. Even Rose was home for a visit, taking a break from her medical studies to spend time with the family. "Do you remember being terrified that I would have to face Thomas and Alina alone?" Bethany asked, her head resting on Quinn's shoulder. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even when you looked like you wanted to disappear into the boardwalk," Quinn replied, his arm around her waist. "I was so convinced my life was over," Bethany mused. "That seeing him with his new wife was the worst thing that could happen to me." "And instead it was the best thing," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "because it brought me to you." "It brought us to each other," Bethany corrected, turning to kiss him properly. "Everything good in my life started that day when a cowboy made sure I did not have to face my former fiancé alone. I would do it again in a heartbeat," Quinn told her. "I would do anything for you, Bethany. Then, now, always." "I know," she said softly, her hand coming up to cup his weathered face. "And that is why this life we built together is so precious. Because it is built on real love, real partnership, real commitment. Not the shallow promises Thomas made but never kept." They sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting their world in shades of gold and shadow. Their children and grandchildren's laughter drifted up from the yard, the sound of the life they had created together. The ranch spread out around them, prosperous and beautiful, the physical manifestation of their dreams. Bethany Zimmerman, who had once been left heartbroken and humiliated, had found something infinitely better than the life she had planned. She had found Quinn Dalton, a cowboy with a kind heart and steady hands who had stepped in when she needed him most. Together they had built not just a ranch but a legacy of hard work and honest love, of children raised to be good people, of a partnership that had weathered every storm. And every evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Bethany gave silent thanks for the day her former fiancé had shown up with his new wife. Because that day had brought her Quinn, had brought her home, had brought her to this life that was more beautiful than any adventure she had ever read about in books. She leaned into Quinn's embrace, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong against her back, and knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because she had settled, not because she had compromised, but because she had found the one person in the world who saw her completely and loved her anyway, who had stood beside her for 25 years and would stand beside her for however many more they were granted. "I love you," she whispered, the words as true now as the first time she had said them in her shop all those years ago. "I love you too," Quinn replied, his voice rich with emotion. "Always have, always will." And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above their ranch, Bethany smiled and let herself sink into the perfect peace of knowing she was exactly where she belonged, with exactly who she belonged with, living a life that was worth every moment of heartbreak it had taken to find it.